My parents faked medical emergencies and manipulated my brother's health to keep me sending them money for years, but then I dug up their dark secrets and used that to destroy them. The moment I announced I was quitting my six-figure finance job to start a graphic design business, my mother's face went completely white. She started clutching her chest like she was having a heart attack. The thing was, she kept peeking at me through her fingers to see if I was buying her performance, and when she saw that I wasn't rushing over to her, she magically recovered enough to scream at me about destroying our family. You see, for 6 years, I've been handing over $800 every month because my parents always have some sort of crisis. Thing is, they own their own auto repair shop, can somehow afford weekly expensive dinners, and just bought a brand new truck. So I've never understood it. I've been their personal ATM since college graduation because they convinced me I owed them for every sacrifice they made. But after watching my mom's Oscar-worthy breakdown over my job change, I finally saw what was really happening. The next week, I cut their monthly allowance in half just to test my theory, and suddenly my mother needed urgent care twice. She'd call me sobbing from waiting rooms about chest pains and unpayable copays, but when I'd arrive, she'd be scrolling Facebook. Until she spotted me, then the gasping and clutching would start again. My girlfriend Everly was the one who truly helped me realize my parents were financially abusing me. She'd been watching for 3 years and never once saw them actually struggle. All the while, their emergencies perfectly aligned with their wants, not their needs. So I started investigating, and what I found made me sick. The week Mom claimed they couldn't afford groceries, I discovered a receipt in her purse for a $200 steakhouse dinner. When Dad begged for emergency car repair money, I caught him bragging on Facebook about his expensive new tool collection. But the real gut punch came when I cornered Jonah, my brother, alone, and he completely broke down. Through tears, he confessed that our parents had been coaching him for years on exactly what to say to manipulate me. They'd sit him down before every family gathering and feed him lines about how desperately they needed their responsible older son and how worried they were about money. The absolute worst part was learning Jonah's entire college fund was fully paid while they'd been lying to me about needing help with his expenses. I'd been working overtime for years funding their lifestyle while they shielded their precious baby boy from any financial responsibility. When I confronted them with evidence of their lies, my mother staged her most dramatic performance yet. She literally collapsed on the kitchen floor, gasping that my accusations were giving her a heart attack, but I caught her peeking at me to measure my reaction, and when I didn't call an ambulance, she miraculously found strength to stand up and scream about my ungratefulness. That's when my father's mask completely slipped, and he started raging about how I owed them everything because they made me who I am, and successful children support their parents. The second I announced I was cutting off all payments, my mother called Jonah hysterically, claiming I was destroying our family and having a mental breakdown. She manipulated him into begging me to just give them what they wanted because her episodes were terrifying him. I realized they'd been using Jonah too and weaponizing his fear of their fake emergencies to control me. The following month became absolute hell as they escalated their tactics every time I ignored their calls. My mother started ambushing me at work during her episodes, forcing me to abandon important meetings while my father began calling Everly directly, claiming I was mentally unstable and needed to be controlled. They even threatened to throw Jonah out unless I returned to being their obedient cash cow, which sent him into panic since he was finishing his senior year. Last week, my mother called an actual ambulance during one of her performances, but when paramedics arrived, she suddenly recovered and claimed she was just stressed about her son abandoning the family. The confused paramedic asked if this had happened before, and Mom got hostile, saying they wouldn't understand family dynamics. I refused to give in, so I let Jonah move in with me. One morning, she left a message claiming she was dying in the hospital, but when Jonah called, they confirmed no one by her name had been admitted. We stared at over 47 missed calls from the last 2 hours, each one a different life-threatening emergency, and Jonah just turned to me with this look of complete exhaustion and asked if we're really going to keep letting them destroy us like this. The next morning, I woke to find my mother standing in my apartment lobby, telling the security guard she was having chest pains and needed her son immediately. The guard looked uncomfortable as she clutched the desk dramatically, but I noticed she kept checking her phone between gasps. When I came down, she immediately straightened up and launched into how I was killing her with stress. I walked past her toward the exit while she followed, grabbing at my sleeve and stumbling theatrically. Other residents stared as she wailed about being abandoned, but I kept moving. She finally gave up the performance when we reached the parking garage, switching instantly to cold fury. She hissed threats about ruining my reputation at work and turning the whole family against me. That afternoon, Jonah showed me text messages from our parents. They were coaching him on what to say to guilt me, complete with specific phrases about family loyalty and how scared he was of losing his home. The messages went back years, documenting their systematic manipulation. Some even included practice sessions where they'd rehearse emotional breakdowns together. My father started showing up at my office building during lunch hours. He'd position himself by the main entrance, approaching my co-workers to share stories about his ungrateful son who abandoned his family. Security eventually eventually had to escort him out when he began following people to their cars, begging them to talk sense into me. The manipulation reached new heights when my mother befriended my elderly neighbor, Mrs. Chen. She'd visit daily, crying about her heartless son while helping with groceries. Mrs. Chen began giving me disapproving looks in the hallway, and I overheard her telling another neighbor about the poor woman whose son left her to suffer. Everly discovered my parents had been calling her workplace, claiming I was having a mental health crisis and needed intervention. Her boss pulled her aside to express concern about our relationship, suggesting she might want to reconsider being with someone so unstable. My parents had found her LinkedIn and were systematically contacting her professional connections. One evening, Jonah broke down completely. He showed me a video our mother had sent him, where she was lying in bed looking genuinely ill, whispering about how she might not make it through the night without her family. But in the background, we could hear our father laughing at something on TV, completely unconcerned. The performance was only for the camera. My parents escalated to showing up at Jonah's friends' houses, telling their parents about our family crisis. They painted me as mentally unstable and dangerous, suggesting Jonah wasn't safe living with me. Several friends' parents called Jonah, concerned about his well-being and offering him places to stay. The financial manipulation became more desperate. My mother started maxing out credit cards, then sending me photos of past due notices with messages about losing their house. But Jonah found receipts in her car for luxury purchases made the same week. She'd spent thousands on jewelry while claiming they couldn't afford groceries. My father began calling my former colleagues from the finance job, spinning tales about how leaving the industry had destroyed my mental health. He begged them to offer me my old position back, claiming it was the only way to save me from complete breakdown. Several reached out, confused by his stories that contradicted everything they knew about me. During this chaos, I discovered something that changed everything. While helping Jonah pack more of his things from our parents' house, I found a folder hidden in the garage. Inside were bank statements showing a hefty inheritance from our grandmother that my parents had hidden from us. They'd been living off this money while extracting payments from me. The statements revealed systematic transfers to investment accounts, vacation funds, and luxury purchases spanning years, all while they cried poverty and demanded my support. The very months they claimed emergencies requiring my money showed large deposits from the hidden inheritance. Jonah stared at the papers in shock, realizing the depth of deception. Our grandmother had left money specifically for our education and future, but our parents had kept it all. They'd even forged documents suggesting the inheritance was minimal and already spent on family expenses. My mother's performances intensified when she realized we'd stopped responding to her emergencies. She began calling extended family members, painting herself as a victim of elder abuse. Cousins I hadn't spoken to in years started reaching out, having heard terrible stories about how I was destroying our parents' golden years. The breaking point came when my mother staged a fall in a grocery store, claiming stress from family abandonment had made her dizzy. Store security reviewed footage showing her carefully positioning herself before gently lowering to the ground. When they confronted her, she fled the store, later claiming I'd somehow orchestrated the whole thing to humiliate her. My father's mask slipped completely during a family gathering we couldn't avoid. In front of everyone, he began ranting about ungrateful children who owed everything to their parents. He revealed his true belief that children existed to serve their parents' needs, that our success belonged to them by right. The extended family watched in shock as he detailed how much money I owed them for raising me, calculating imaginary debts from birth. My mother tried to stop him, realizing he was exposing their scheme, but the damage was done. Family members began questioning the stories they'd been told about me. Jonah found the courage to speak up, sharing how our parents had coached him to manipulate me. He showed aunts and uncles the text messages, the practice scripts, the calculated emotional abuse. The room fell silent as the truth emerged. Years of deception laid bare. My mother attempted one final performance, clutching her chest and gasping about the stress of being exposed. But this time, even family members who'd believed her before saw through it. When no one rushed to help, she miraculously recovered and stormed out, my father trailing behind her. In the days that followed, more truth emerged. Family members shared stories of loans never repaid, manufactured emergencies that extracted money, and elaborate deceptions spanning decades. My parents had been running the same manipulation on others, though none as extensively as what they'd done to me. Everly stood by me through everything, helping me see that their behavior wasn't my fault. She'd grown up in a healthy family and provided perspective on how abnormal my situation was. Her parents even offered support, appalled by what we'd endured. The support from Everly's parents became a lifeline during the weeks that followed. They invited Jonah and me for dinner regularly, providing the stable family environment we'd never experienced. During one visit, Everly's mother pulled me aside and handed me a business card for a therapist who specialized in family trauma. I tucked it into my wallet, not ready to face that step yet. My parents' desperation manifested in increasingly erratic behavior. They began driving past my apartment building at odd hours, leaving notes on my car windshield filled with alternating threats and pleas. One morning, I found my car tires deflated, though I couldn't prove they'd done it. The building's security footage conveniently showed nothing due to a blind spot they'd somehow discovered. Jonah struggled with nightmares about our mother's fake medical emergencies. He'd wake up gasping, convinced she was actually dying this time. I'd find him checking his phone obsessively, terrified of missing a real emergency hidden among the manufactured ones. The psychological damage ran deeper than either of us had realized. At work, I discovered my father had escalated his campaign. He'd created a fake LinkedIn profile posing as a concerned family friend, messaging my colleagues about my supposed mental health crisis. My manager called me in after receiving multiple messages, expressing worry about my stability and suggesting the company should intervene for my own good. I spent hours documenting everything, creating a file of evidence showing the pattern of manipulation, screenshots of messages, bank statements, receipts contradicting their claims of poverty. The folder grew thicker each day as their attempts to regain control intensified. My mother's next move caught me off guard. She befriended the mother of one of my important clients, meeting her at a charity event and discovering the connection to me. Within days, she'd poisoned that relationship with stories of my instability and unreliability. The client called to express concerns about continuing our contract. Everly intercepted a package addressed to me at her apartment, where I'd been spending more time to avoid my parents' stalking. Inside were childhood photos with manipulative messages written on the backs, detailing every sacrifice they'd supposedly made and calculating the emotional debt I owed. Some photos had been altered, with my face scratched out. The harassment extended to social media. My parents created multiple fake accounts to comment on my business pages, leaving reviews suggesting I was unstable and unreliable. They posted on community groups warning people about doing business with someone who would abandon his own family. Each post carefully crafted to damage my reputation without crossing into obvious defamation. Jonah discovered our parents had been accessing his email through a password they'd insisted on knowing for emergencies. They'd been reading our communications, tracking our plans, and gathering information to use against us. We spent an entire night changing passwords and securing accounts we didn't even know were compromised. My mother's performances evolved into public spectacles. She began showing up at restaurants where she knew I had business meetings, collapsing dramatically near my table while clutching her chest. The first time, I almost believed it was real, but the pattern became obvious when it happened 3 times in 2 weeks, always perfectly timed to disrupt important discussions. The financial investigation revealed more disturbing truths. Our parents had opened credit cards in my name years ago, using them carefully enough to avoid detection, but building debt they could leverage. When I tried to dispute these accounts, they produced forged documents suggesting I'd authorized them to handle my finances during college. My father's behavior grew more aggressive. He began following Everly to her gym, sitting in the parking lot and approaching her as she left. He'd alternate between tearful pleas about reuniting the family and angry accusations that she'd turned me against them. The gym eventually banned him after multiple members complained about his harassment. Extended family members started reaching out with their own stories. My aunt revealed that my parents had borrowed $30,000 for a supposed medical emergency years ago, never repaying it despite their hidden wealth. My uncle shared how they'd manipulated him into co-signing a loan they later defaulted on, destroying his credit. The discovery process continued when Jonah found more hidden documents, insurance policies we didn't know existed, investment accounts in our names they controlled, even a storage unit filled with expensive items purchased during their supposed financial crises. The scope of their deception seemed endless. My mother escalated to hiring a private investigator to follow me, though she chose poorly. The investigator, sensing something wrong with the situation, actually approached me to warn that my mother had asked him to find dirt to use against me. He refunded her money and provided me with recordings of their conversations. Work became increasingly difficult as my parents' campaign intensified. They discovered which coffee shop I frequented before meetings and began showing up there, loudly discussing their abandonment to anyone who would listen. My mother would position herself where clients could see her crying, creating an uncomfortable atmosphere that affected my professional relationships. Jonah's mental health deteriorated as the pressure mounted. He started having panic attacks when his phone rang, convinced each call brought news of a real emergency we'd ignored. I found him one night sitting in the bathroom, having thrown his phone in the toilet to stop the constant barrage of manipulative messages. My parents attempted to weaponize the holidays. They sent messages to every family member announcing they were canceling Thanksgiving because their sons had destroyed their will to live. They included photos of an empty dining room table set for 4, with our names on place cards next to untouched plates. The manipulation was transparent but effective on some relatives. Everly's employer finally had enough of the harassment. They sent my parents a cease and desist letter after documenting dozens of calls, emails, and attempts to damage Everly's professional reputation. My father responded by showing up at their office, claiming the company was enabling elder abuse by supporting our relationship. The breaking point for Jonah came when our parents contacted his academic advisor, suggesting he was living in an unsafe environment with an unstable brother. They provided carefully edited text conversations and selectively shared emails to paint a picture of danger. The university launched an investigation that terrified Jonah Jonah about his academic future. I hired a lawyer to send a formal cease and desist letter, though I knew it would only escalate things. Sure enough, my mother responded with a performance at the lawyer's office, collapsing in their lobby while claiming the stress of legal threats from her own son was killing her. The security footage showed her checking her makeup in the elevator before beginning her performance. My business suffered as their sabotage campaign expanded. They created competing social media pages with similar names, messaging potential clients to warn them about working with someone who would abandon commitments. They posted fake testimonials from supposed former clients detailing imaginary disasters, each action carefully calculated to cause maximum damage. The investigation into our grandmother's inheritance revealed the final piece of the puzzle. Not only had they hidden the money, but they'd also convinced her to change her will in her final confused years, redirecting funds meant for our education into their control. The original will, which we found a copy of, had split everything equally between all grandchildren. Jonah and I spent nights piecing together the timeline of deception. Every family crisis over the years aligned with large purchases or vacations. Their emergency car repairs coincided with new luxury items appearing in their home. The pattern was so clear in hindsight that we felt foolish for not seeing it sooner. My mother's public performances reached new heights of absurdity. She began carrying medical alert jewelry and would trigger false alarms in public spaces when she spotted me, forcing emergency responders to waste resources on her fake emergencies. After the third incident, local paramedics started recognizing her and documenting the pattern. The effect on my mental health was severe. I found myself checking locks obsessively, installing security cameras, and varying my routes to avoid predictable patterns. The constant vigilance exhausted me. Everly suggested I finally use that therapist's card, and I made the appointment, recognizing I needed help processing the trauma. My father's attempts to infiltrate my professional network continued. He joined industry associations using his real name, but claiming to be interested in learning about his son's field. At networking events, he'd corner people to share his version of our family story, painting himself as a devoted father trying to save his mentally ill son. Jonah's courage grew as he saw the truth more clearly. He began standing up to their manipulation attempts, calling out their lies in the moment instead of playing along. This shift enraged our parents, who had counted on his compliance. Their messages to him became more vicious, threatening to destroy both our lives if he didn't return to being their obedient son. The financial forensics revealed one last shocking detail. Our parents had been planning this for years, gradually increasing their demands as my income grew. They'd kept detailed notes about my salary progression, calculating exactly how much they could extract without pushing me to investigate. The premeditation made their betrayal even more painful. My mother's final desperate play involved contacting my biggest client directly, scheduling a meeting under false pretenses. She arrived at their office dressed professionally, initially presenting herself as a concerned mother, wanting to ensure her son was mentally stable enough to handle their important project. When that didn't work, she broke down crying about being abandoned. The client, a sharp businesswoman who'd built her own company, saw through the manipulation immediately. She not only refused to terminate our contract, but also shared her own story of escaping a toxic family situation. Her support meant more than she knew, validating that success despite family sabotage was possible. As winter approached, the daily harassment took its toll on both Jonah and me. We were exhausted from constant vigilance, drained from documenting every interaction, worn down by the relentless attempts to destroy our lives. But something had shifted. We were no longer reacting from fear or guilt, but from a place of understanding. Our parents had revealed themselves completely, and there was no going back. The next morning brought a development that changed everything. While organizing the evidence folder, I noticed something strange in the inheritance documents. A handwritten note tucked between pages in our grandmother's shaky script, addressed to Jonah and me directly. She'd written about her fears that our parents would misuse the money, expressing hope we'd find this someday. The note included contact information for her estate lawyer, someone our parents had claimed died years ago. I called the number immediately. The lawyer, very much alive, expressed relief at hearing from us. He'd been trying to reach us for years, but our parents had intercepted all communication. During our meeting that afternoon, he revealed the full scope of their deception. Not only had they hidden a substantial inheritance, but they'd also forged our signatures on documents declining our portions. The fraud was extensive enough to involve serious legal consequences if pursued. Jonah sat beside me, processing this information while the lawyer explained our options. We could reclaim our inheritance portions, though it would require confronting our parents with evidence of their criminal actions. The decision weighed heavily on both of us. Despite everything, the thought of sending our parents to jail felt overwhelming. That evening, our mother attempted her most elaborate performance yet. She arrived at my apartment building in an ambulance she'd somehow convinced to transport her, claiming severe chest pains. The paramedics wheeled her into the lobby on a stretcher while she moaned dramatically. But when she spotted Jonah and me watching from the elevator, she forgot her act momentarily, sitting up to gesture frantically at us, before remembering she was supposed to be dying. The paramedics exchanged knowing looks. One pulled me aside, side, explaining this was the fourth time they'd responded to her calls this month. They were documenting everything for potential abuse of emergency services charges. He handed me a card for their supervisor, suggesting we might want to discuss the pattern of false calls. My father's harassment reached new extremes when he discovered the lawyer meeting. He began calling every hour, leaving messages that alternated between threats and desperate pleas. When we didn't respond, he escalated to contacting Jonah's professors directly, claiming family emergency after family emergency to try getting Jonah's location during classes. The university's administration finally intervened after multiple professors reported the disruptive calls. They implemented a communication protocol, blocking our parents' numbers and flagging any attempts to contact Jonah through official channels. The dean personally assured Jonah his academic standing wouldn't be affected by our parents' behavior. During this chaos, Everly's parents stepped up their support. They offered their guest room to Jonah during particularly stressful periods, giving him a safe space when the apartment felt too confining. Her mother, a retired teacher, helped him study for finals while dealing with the emotional turmoil. Her father, who'd built his own business, offered me advice on protecting my company from our parents' sabotage attempts. The private investigator our mother had hired reached out again with more information. He'd continued investigating on his own, disturbed by what he'd witnessed. He provided recordings of our mother coaching our father on manipulation tactics, discussing strategies to break us down psychologically. In one recording, she laughed about her fake medical emergencies, rating her performances, and planning increasingly dramatic scenarios. My business began recovering as clients recognized the truth. Several who'd been contacted by our parents reached out with support, sharing their own stories of difficult family situations. One client increased their contract, specifically stating they valued working with someone who understood complex family dynamics. The attempted sabotage had backfired, actually strengthening some professional relationships. Jonah's transformation continued as he found his voice. He started setting boundaries with our parents, blocking their numbers during study hours, and refusing to engage with manipulation attempts. When they sent flying monkeys in the form of distant relatives, he calmly explained the situation with evidence, converting several relatives to our side. The inheritance lawyer provided crucial information about protecting ourselves financially. We discovered our parents had been planning to claim power of attorney over us, citing mental health concerns. They'd already begun the paperwork, forging medical documents suggesting we were unstable. The lawyer helped us file protective orders preventing any such attempts. My mother's public performances became increasingly desperate and bizarre. She started wearing a medical alert bracelet that she'd trigger in stores when she thought she saw us, even when we weren't there. Local businesses began recognizing her pattern. One coffee shop manager called to warn me when she'd set up camp outside, waiting to ambush me during my usual morning visit. The evidence folder had grown to 3 binders. Jonah meticulously organized everything chronologically, creating a clear timeline of escalating abuse. The patterns were undeniable. Every financial crisis aligned with luxury purchases. Every medical emergency coincided with attempts to regain control. The documentation painted a picture of calculated long-term manipulation. Our parents made a critical error when they attempted to access my business bank accounts. They'd somehow obtained enough information to try resetting passwords, but the bank's security protocols caught the attempts. The fraud department contacted me immediately, and I discovered they'd been trying similar tactics with multiple financial institutions. Extended family members continued reaching out as word spread. Our cousin Catherine, who'd always been close to our parents, called in tears after discovering they'd been lying about her own mother's health to extract money from her. She'd been sending monthly payments for fictional medical treatments while our aunt was actually in perfect health. The web of deception extended far beyond just Jonah and me. My father's professional reputation began crumbling as his behavior became known. Clients at the auto repair shop started questioning his integrity after witnessing his harassment campaigns. Several longtime customers took their business elsewhere, uncomfortable supporting someone who would stalk his own children. The financial pressure they'd always claimed to face was becoming real, but now self-inflicted. Jonah discovered our parents had installed tracking software on devices they'd given us over the years. An old laptop, a tablet they'd insisted we needed for family video calls, even a smartwatch they'd gifted me for graduation. We spent an afternoon destroying these devices, ensuring no digital surveillance remained. The extent of their monitoring efforts was staggering. The therapist I'd finally started seeing helped me understand the psychological patterns at play. She explained how our parents had created a trauma bond through intermittent reinforcement, mixing affection with abuse to keep us off balance. Understanding the mechanics helped both Jonah and me recognize manipulation tactics more quickly. My mother's final attempt at a public performance backfired spectacularly. She collapsed in the middle of a busy shopping center, claiming I'd pushed her, but multiple security cameras captured her carefully positioning herself and gently lowering to the ground while looking around to ensure witnesses. When security confronted her with the footage, she fled the scene, leaving behind the medical alert jewelry she'd been wearing. The breaking point came during an unexpected encounter at the bank. I was closing the accounts our parents had accessed when they walked in, a apparently there to withdraw money from our grandmother's hidden accounts. The look of shock on their faces when they saw me was genuine for once. They tried to leave, but I'd already asked bank security to prevent them from fleeing. In the bank manager's office, with security present, I presented evidence of their fraud: the forged signatures, the hidden inheritance, the attempted identity theft. My parents' masks finally shattered completely. My father raged about ungrateful children, while my mother switched rapidly between fake medical symptoms and vicious threats. The bank manager called the police. Jonah arrived as our parents were being questioned by officers. He stood tall, no longer the frightened boy they'd manipulated for years. When our mother appealed to him with tears, claiming she was having chest pains, he simply turned to the officer and noted this was her standard manipulation tactic. The officer, who'd responded to several of her false emergency calls, nodded knowingly. Given the evidence, our parents faced multiple charges including fraud, identity theft, and harassment. The prosecutor, reviewing the documentation we'd compiled, seemed shocked by the extent of their crimes. They offered us input on the charges, recognizing the complicated family dynamics involved. Jonah and I made the difficult decision not to pursue the harshest penalties. Despite everything, we couldn't bring ourselves to send them to prison. Instead, we agreed to a plea deal that included probation, mandatory psychological counseling, and a comprehensive restraining order. They would have to repay the stolen inheritance and were barred from any contact with us. The final confrontation happened outside the courthouse. Our parents, flanked by their lawyer, approached as we were leaving. My mother, for once without a dramatic performance, looked genuinely broken. My father's rage had turned to something hollow. They started to speak, but their lawyer quickly intervened, reminding them of the no-contact order. As they walked away, I felt an unexpected wave of grief. Not for the parents they were, but for the parents Jonah and I had deserved. Everly squeezed my hand while Jonah stood beside me, and I realized we'd built our own family, one based on truth, support, and genuine love, rather than manipulation and control. The inheritance money, once recovered, went toward therapy for both Jonah and me, paying off the debts our parents had accumulated in our names and establishing security for our futures. Jonah decided to pursue graduate school without the weight of family manipulation. I expanded my business, no longer held back by constant sabotage attempts. 6 months later, life had settled into a new rhythm. The nightmares faded, though both Jonah and I still sometimes checked our phones with anxiety when unknown numbers called. We'd learned to recognize triggers and support each other through difficult moments. Everly and I grew stronger, our relationship no longer under constant attack. Our extended family gradually understood the truth. Some relationships were repaired, while others remained broken. The cousins and aunts who'd also been victimized formed an unexpected support network. We shared stories, validated each other's experiences, and slowly healed from years of manipulation. I occasionally wondered about our parents, whether they'd gained any insight through mandatory counseling, but I'd learned that their potential growth wasn't my responsibility. My focus was on building a life free from their influence, creating the family dynamics I'd always craved with chosen family who genuinely cared. Jonah graduated with honors, free to celebrate without manufactured crises destroying his achievement. As he walked across the stage, I thought about how different this was from my own graduation, which our parents had overshadowed with fake emergencies. Now we could simply be proud, present, and genuinely happy for each other. The business thrived without constant sabotage. Clients appreciated my work without poisonous whispers undermining every project. I hired employees, built something sustainable, and proved that success was possible despite our parents' attempts to destroy it. The graphic design company became everything I'd dreamed of when I left finance. Looking at Jonah one evening as we had dinner with Everly's family, I saw someone transformed. No longer the anxious boy checking his phone constantly, but a confident young man planning his future. We'd survived our parents' campaign of destruction and emerged stronger. The scars remained, but they no longer defined us.